In the previous video, I unceremoniously tore out the engine mounting brackets I spent a good amount of time making last year and welded in a new one on the driver's side. Then I tore that one out and did it again. In this video, I'm going to get the other side built, and by the end we'll have the engine hanging back in its home so I can finally get on with everything else. If you're not up to speed, the reason I started again is because I designed the old mountings with the intention of having the engine as low as possible. Then I realised that as low as possible was too low, and the original design made it impossible to raise the engine. For the new design, I came up with a solution that mimics the way Volkswagen did things. With this design, I can raise or lower the engine as much as I wish, and I can fine-tune its XY position by changing the transverse plates that bridge the drivetrain to the mounts. After getting everything lined up and square, I checked to see if I could use the factory gearbox bracket. It would have saved me a bunch of time, but with everything else level, this just wasn't, so I decided not to use it and carry on making the mounting plinth. The mount is now pretty much finished, just been prepping and cleaning it up, ready to go onto the car. I've already prepared the area that I'm going to be welding it to, so I've just taken the paint off any seam sealer in that ridge there, and it fits on there really well. Spent quite a lot of time getting all those to match up quite nicely, and it's all level as well, so I think this is a pretty good way of doing it. The other way, I actually welded it all together on the car, and I found that getting some of the welds to play nice with it in situ was a bit hard, so this is a better way of doing it. Not particularly happy with the way the welds look. Pretty confident that they've dug in really well. I'm just not too pleased with the way that they looked. So the advantage to making this mount the way that I did was that I can get up here and get these welds quite nice with the access I need. The downside is that when it comes to doing the bottom side, I can't get my torch in there. So in some cases I had to stick it in through this hole just to get the access I need. So whilst I'm not happy with the way they look, they seem to have penetrated okay, so they just look a bit ugly, that's all. I did change some tacks along the top here as well, and then towards the end I forgot that this was thin metal and I blew some nice holes, so I'm going to have to fix that later on. But this is solid now. So that's now both of the engine mounts welded in. So I still need to do a little bit of tidying up on all of them. I think I said before that I want to triangulate these down just to make it look a little bit nicer. But functionally, I think this will work just fine. Oh, I also need to make a second actual mount, one of those. Actually, I need to make two because that one's just the prototype, but I need to make two brand new ones properly. So that will be in the next part. Much like I did on the engine side mount, I'm reusing part of the gearbox mount to save on time and materials. The bushing carrier and its gussets are cut off with a bandsaw, leaving me with a clean foundation to build my new mount onto. This prototype mount has done its job now, so it's time to build a proper replacement. I ended up improving on the design slightly when I made the gearbox side, so I'll give you the quick summary of making the engine side and go into more detail on the gearbox side afterwards. All I had to do was make a structure that put the bushing and the mounting holes in the same place as the prototype, except this time the footprint is widened to make full use of the mounting plinth, which should help with stability. Quick cardboard prototype then. So this is for the gearbox side mount. So to start off with, we've got the base plate. This basically mirrors what the plinth is on the chassis. So we've got the 2 holes to mount through, so a bolt will go through there, and then we've got a hole in the middle for the bushing to poke through. Here we've got the piece of tubing that will be the part that the bushing will actually sit in. It'll be pressed into there. So that will go in the middle. We have some gussets, and they are spaced in such a way that they are either side of the hole with enough clearance to allow a socket in. So now we've got this part here, which is just a top plate. So we've got some cutouts here for the bolt to be able to go through and enough clearance for a socket. And then we've also got it bent at 45 degrees on each end to match the angles on the side here. So that will press on top of there, and it will sit flush with the top of this cut pipe here. And then on the end, we've got these closing plates that will add additional strength. So that will close that section off. Same goes for the other side too. And it'll just box it in quite nicely. So we'll actually end up with, don't know what you describe this as, like a trapezium shape with the bushing sticking out. Additionally, there'll be some holes drilled in the top, 1, 2, 3, 4 there. They'll be threaded, and they will allow us to attach the plate that will sit on top of the bushing to stop it from being pulled out. So that will be incorporated into this top piece too. So that's the plan. Let's get it built. So I was doing the top plate on this, and I was going to cut all the holes out. And what I was planning on doing was using the hole saw to cut the main big hole out, but go for a size that's about, I don't know, maybe a centimetre too small. Then I was going to creep up on it with the die grinder, and then it'd be a perfect fit. Really frustratingly, after I drilled the hole with the hole saw, the run out was so bad on the thing that it came out, well, it came out like this. The locating hole was dead center, but the run out was so bad on the hole saw somehow that it crept out by a huge amount. So when I put this on top now, there's now a big gap. So I'm going to have to fill that with weld, which is not what I wanted to do. This isn't a massively structural piece anyway, but you know, most of the structure is in here, but anyway. The mount is looking good, just needs a coat of paint. And now, fair warning for some egregious tool misuse. The retention plate I mentioned earlier will come later on. I want to cast my own polyurethane bushings and I'll incorporate the recess for the plate into the casting, but it's not needed right now. Anyway, now to connect it to the gearbox. Should be right. The reason I'm installing the bolts upside down here is because I'll be using studs instead of captive nuts. This helps massively with installation and I'll be adapting the engine side to use the same. The reason they're comically long is because it was the only AM12 hardware I had. All of the hardware I'm using here is grade 4.8 because that's all B&Q sells. This is only temporary and I'll be changing these out for grade 8 or 10 once everything is finalised. Until then, B&Q bolts it is. And now for the second time, the moment of truth. Again. I mean, that's in there.
Yeah.
That's...
But we knew it was going to stay in there.
It's fully supported. And it doesn't rock as much as the old mount did either. Shall I get on it?
I don't know. Do you want to tempt fate?
I'm getting on it. If it falls, it falls.
If it falls, I will be liable to laugh.
Look. We are back. That works beautifully. Yeah, the mount flexes like it's supposed to. Nothing else is flexing, only the bushing. So it'll hold the engine plus 70 kilos wet of me. Yeah, excellent. Now that the platform holding everything up is gone, I can finally see if the Micro's longitudinal crossmember will still fit. And it does. This is good news because it means I can use it to attach pitch mountings that will stop the engine from rocking when torque goes through it, just as it did when the original engine was in there. It also serves as the lowest point in the engine bay, so I no longer have to worry about the oil pan smashing against the ground. As you can see, it barely fits. The oil level sensor is covered, but access to the connector is possible from the other side. Normally this crossmember would bolt up to the radiator support that I removed in an earlier video, but because I didn't think I'd be able to reuse this part, I never provisioned mounting holes for it. This means that before this video ends, you get a bonus bracket. This ties up the front end nicely, and I get the front jacking point back too. There is a lot left to do before I can call this conversion anywhere near complete, but nearly all of the mechanical aspects depend on the engine being in the right place. Now that it is, I can finally get on with everything else, but that will have to be in a future video. If you're not subscribed already, hit the button if you think I'm worthy. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I hope you'll join me in the next one.